Hello, and welcome to our conversation about. Today we're going to start studying the Manifest Destiny, this westward expansion of the early to mid 19th century in America. Now, this is an era that's going to shape the nation's borders, economy, and social fabric in many, many ways. And we're going to look at what Manifest Destiny meant, the motivations behind it, and some of the impact on indigenous peoples, Mexico as well, and how it's going to set the stage for the conflict that will become the American Civil War. So the term Manifest Destiny first appears in the 1840s. John L. O'Sullivan is the one that first quotes or coins this term. And it captures the idea of American destiny, that we were destined to, or perhaps even divinely appointed, to expand across North America from coast to coast. And this wasn't just about land. It was a belief that American culture, political systems, and values were superior and should spread across the continent. Now, the roots of this comes from a mix of nationalist pride, religious zeal, and economic ambition. Remember what's going on here. We're kind of in the middle of that Second Great Awakening period. Now, many Americans saw this as their duty to bring civilization to new territories. They believed that expanding the United States borders was an inevitable part of the nation's destiny. In fact, we've been expanding since Jamestown. And so that's kind of the background that we're talking about here. Now, by the early 1800s, America had already doubled its territory with the Louisiana Purchase. That had happened in 1803. But in the 1840s, people's hunger for land is intensifying. Many Americans saw Western territories as opportunities for farming and ranching and economic growth. And the expansion brings jobs and land and potential wealth to settlers. Moreover, it provides a way to escape the crowded East Coast, where industrialization is beginning to shape urban life. And as today, there are some folks that do not want to live in the cities. Folks see the West as an escape from that, as cities like New York and others are growing larger and larger and larger. Now, the West offered fertile lands, particularly for southern cotton growers who saw the territories as perfect for expanding their plantations, especially where there's enough moisture, enough rain to allow cotton to grow. Go too far west, it's really not possible. In addition to economic interest, though, religious groups like the Mormons are going to seek refuge in the West, a place to practice their faith free of persecution, a haven, if you will. Now, the push west is going to come at some tragic costs. Native American tribes are going to face forced displacement, often through violence and broken treaties. And we have the Trail of Tears in 1837, 1838, response to the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And we're going to see the establishment of some of the earliest reservations in present-day Oklahoma, then called Indian Territory. Meanwhile, in the 1830s, 1835 and 1836, we have the Texas Revolution, and perhaps I'll do a whole video on that at some point in the future. But the annexation of Texas in 1845 is going to heighten the tensions between the United States and Mexico, and it eventually will lead to the Mexican-American War of 1846. Now, the war is going to end with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, through which Mexico is going to cede a vast territory of land. A vast amount of land that would become the American Southwest. And this would include California, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of several other states. And this land gain was enormous, but it heightened debates over the future of slavery, as Americans clashed over whether these new territories should permit slavery or not. Remember, the Missouri Compromise had put a northern limit to slavery, but only to the existing territory at the time. Now we've moved beyond that existing territory. Now we've gone all the way to the Pacific coast. Now, westward expansion is going to open new trade routes as well, like the Santa Fe Trail. It's going to create hubs for commerce. It's going to fuel the economy, especially for northern businesses that supplied goods to these developing areas. For southern cotton growers who saw potential for plantations. Raw materials in the West will be heading east, especially after the introduction of the expanding railroad system. By the way, this rapid expansion is going to contribute to economic instability as well. We have that panic in 1857 when we start to see a number of northern businesses begin to fail. Northern textile mills are relying heavily on southern cotton, and so as we start to see economic downturns, it is going to have a ripple effect across the nation, although the South is not as affected as badly as the North will be. What about railroads and telegraph? At communication. Transportation communication advances are going to be essential to this period as well. Railroads connected eastern cities with new western territories. Now, we don't have a transcontinental railroad yet. That will not be completed until 1869. But as the railroad expands, so does the telegraph. These usually were built along the railroads because they were easier to maintain that way. The telegraph enabled near-instant communication, binding the country closer together politically and economically, but also amplifying the pace of territorial integration. And with it, the spread of conflicts and divisions over how these new areas would be governed. News is spreading much, much more rapidly. Now, the manifest destiny, this whole issue of manifest destiny, wasn't only a unifying force, it also became deeply divisive. The new territories acquired are going to raise urgent questions. Would these be free states or slave states? And tensions over the issue, particularly with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is going to open up Kansas and Nebraska to popular sovereignty. Folks that live there get to vote for themselves whether they want slavery or not. The Missouri Compromise, which says we're going to bring 2 states in at a time, 1 slave, 1 free. These are only deepening tensions as settlers bring competing values and interest into these regions. And these conflicts would eventually lead us to civil war. But during the period of manifest destiny, the divisions weren't yet insurmountable. We can get by them and we can sort of move beyond we can move beyond it. We can work it through. We're going to get to the point we are not going to be able to work it through. Now, political leaders are going to try to compromise. They're going to hope to keep the balance between free states and slave states. But the question is going to loom over the debate with westward expansion. And by the way, let me just go ahead and say this. When we speak about slave states and free states, we're also discussing a whole package of beliefs. The slave states tend to be small government and less taxes and leave me alone. And then the free states tend to be more large government, the more federalist minded. Go back to the federalist and the anti-federalist argument. So, again, it's not just about slaves and free, it's a whole package, and that's why it's important to many people to keep a balance of power in the Senate. The North's population has grown to the point that, quite frankly, the South is never going to win any kind of arguments in the House of Representatives because of the larger Northern population, which we've talked about already. But the Senate becomes the great balancer, and we're beginning to see some shifts. Are we going to be able to maintain that balance? So to wrap this up, the idea of manifest destiny is a powerful idea, and it's going to drive the United States to expand its borders and to transform the country. And it represents hope, opportunity, the vision of a unified continent. But it's also going to have some highlighting of dark aspects of American history, as the dream came at a high cost, particularly for indigenous peoples. And of course, the defeat of Mexico means they lose a large part of their northern territory as well. So this drive is going to bring about massive economic opportunities, accelerate technological advancement. It's going to connect the United States in ways that reshaped its national identity. And it's also going to bring the country closer to this internal conflict that will be sort of the American epic, the American Civil War. We're going to have to confront some contradictions within our vision of freedom and equality and expansion. All right, so thanks for joining me on this. I hope it's been helpful. Give me a thumb up if it is, and leave me a comment if you wish. And again, I will see you as we continue this conversation in just a very short time. Take care. Good luck on your test. Bye-bye.